Oh my gosh, the hugest Nintendo Switch 2 game leak was just basically confirmed. And this could mean so much more. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how we just got an official announcement from Nintendo of a new game coming to Nintendo Switch 2, a spin-off of Splatoon 3, Splatoon Raiders. And also, we are getting a pretty big update to Splatoon 3, which includes a Switch 2 upgrade in just a couple days. But this news has even bigger implications beyond the Splatoon series, which is already alone exciting, but this looks to be further supporting and essentially confirming a huge leak that is telling us about other big games that are coming directly from Nintendo to Switch 2 in the not so distant future, it looks like. So it's all very exciting, and that's what I want to dive into today. But before going forward, let me point out, I'm aiming for a goal of 60,000 subscribers. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So before we get into how this new info confirms this huge leak and all the implications of that, let's first just talk about this new announcement here. So Splatoon Raiders, we do not have a release date for it yet, but there do appear to be some interesting things going on with this particular game. However, Nintendo also announced that we're getting an upgrade for Splatoon 3 on Switch 2, and this upgrade is coming very soon, June 12th. We're going to see better resolution, improved frame rate in certain areas, there will be cross-platform play with Switch 1 owners, there's going to be 30 new weapon kits added, Urchin Underpass is making a comeback, and there's going to be some new stat tracking options. But moving on to Splatoon Raiders itself, here's the official summary. The first Splatoon series spin-off is coming. Splatoon Raiders will center around a mechanic adventuring with deep cut to the mysterious Spiralite Islands. I find this wording to be very interesting because they say the first Splatoon series spin-off, suggesting that there may be more in the future. And considering what we've gone with Splatoon DLC expansions in the past, how they've offered essentially new little adventures, there could be more like this, and maybe this is basically what we're looking at here with Splatoon Raiders. It is a Splatoon adventure, so somewhat like another campaign we can enjoy. I've enjoyed the Splatoon campaigns, and it seems like Nintendo's going to be providing these separately outside of the main games. This might be a great stopgap before we eventually get Splatoon 4. And here are some screenshots of the game so far. That water looks nice. The visuals here definitely seem to have taken a significant step up over what we saw from Splatoon 3 on Switch 1. I really love the art style here, it feels very different from anything we've seen before. But there are some other interesting details to extrapolate from this. So as shared by Senpai at CSenpai on Twitter here, they put together some images that I think are fairly important for this discussion, one of which they share one of the leaks from Midori, how here you see Midori saying, there is a game project at Nintendo with the codename Spiral. By researching the data I've received in the last month, it is very likely that this is a codename for the next entry in the Splatoon series. And so, what are we exploring? These Spiralite Islands. So it looks like one of the leaked codenames of the Nintendo project, which we believe to be a Splatoon game, a lot of us thought maybe it would be a Splatoon 4, it's actually a spin-off Splatoon game, and yes, Spiral had to do with Spiralite Islands. That seems very likely. And we'll dive further into what this leak may mean in a bit here, but I first want to point out some other things shared by Senpai here, because I think it's pretty interesting for the overall Splatoon story and lore. So they mention how the band Deep Cut had some lyrics from their song 3 Wishes, and it seems to represent things from the trailer. On we run, so much fun, where no one has yet been. What will we find in the land beyond the sands? And you see here, there's like an island off onto the sea, right? They're flying off into. You see this giant tornado or vortex with a light in there, and here it says, surging down the line, glowing promise we hold in our hands, reflecting off themselves to build a guiding gleam. Our excitement shows the way, leading us on and on. What's that odd glow? Till we reach the lair where evil lies in wait, the monsters that we face ahead. Do you know just how we got so strong? It's all thanks to the power of our bond. When I get there together with my dearest friends. So this is an eye that we see from the trailer. There's some sort of tease of a major enemy in this adventure. And yeah, it's really cool how in the Splatoon series, they always find ways to foreshadow future updates and expansions to the games. So very cool stuff there. But let's now start to peel away at the layers here in terms of what this means for the bigger picture of other games as well, because it does seem to be further supporting a huge leak we have gotten. So as I brought up earlier, Midori is someone responsible for providing a variety of codename leaks, and at the time when they came out, a lot of people were really underselling the value of these codename leaks, but based off these codename leaks, we've had a really good understanding of different games that have been on the way. So last year, there were 2 codenames that were confirmed for Switch 1. One by the codename of Edward, which we understood to be some type of Zelda title related to Link's Awakening, and we got Echoes of Wisdom, that was confirmed. We also had the codename of Banquet, which led us to believe we'd be getting some sort of follow-up to the Super Mario Party series, and we did. We got Super Mario Party Jamboree. So 2 of the 8 codenames were confirmed last year, but even more have been confirmed this year. So another codename from Midori was Yu-King O. Yu-King is a codename for Breath of the Wild. The O, which we eventually came to learn was representing the codename of Switch 2, we know is essentially a remaster for Breath of the Wild, and that has been confirmed. We've gone the Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition. But then also, there was a codename by Silver Star that many people were not sure what it might mean. However, I put out a theory last year that it might mean a 3D Donkey Kong game made by some part of the Mario Odyssey team. And what has been confirmed this year? Donkey Kong Bonanza, which a lot of people have been remarking how it seems like it's being made by the Mario Odyssey team. Myself personally, I do not believe it's being made directly by the entire Mario Odyssey team, but I do think some part of that team has carried over to this project, and certainly the engine that was used for Mario Odyssey has likely been updated for Bonanza. This part's not 100% totally confirmed, but it's one of those things where everyone is pretty much under total agreement. This is very likely to be the case. And now with Splatoon Raiders, it seems like we've gotten another codename leak confirmed, as I brought up earlier. Codename Spiral seems very likely, as we already knew was related to some sort of Splatoon game, to be Splatoon Raiders taking place in the Spiralite Islands. So to be clear, this is not 100% confirmed, but this is one of those things where it essentially is almost certainly true. And now 5 of the 8 codename leaks have been basically almost totally confirmed. So then, what are the other 3? One of them is SP Red, which I believe to be the next 3D Mario because Red is always used in mainline Mario codename projects, as in platformers like Mario Odyssey, Bowser's Fury, Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy, Mario Wonder, not to be confused with something like Mario Kart. Mario Kart games tend to have codenames like Booster or Turbo. And also, of course, Nintendo's working on 3D Mario. They always have 3D Mario available early on in a console's life. I don't think this is any different. We've already talked about in a few different videos how Donkey Kong Bonanza, while definitely a big effort and is probably the main 3D platformer for this year, I do not think is replacing 3D Mario for the early years of Switch 2. I think 3D Mario is still likely not that far off. We have the other codename Bavana, which many of us believe is related to Switch Sports because Switch Sports is codenamed Elsa, and it seems to be there's some sort of relation between the characters of Anna and Elsa. That's the reference there. So then, what would be this follow-up to Switch Sports? We're not entirely sure, although some people have theorized that perhaps the same team behind Switch Sports is working on Dragon Drive. So that is a possibility, but it's not confirmed at this point in time. And then the final one is Project Legacy, which is believed to be the next Monolith Soft title. Finally, the new IP that we've been waiting so many years for, that they were hiring for throughout the entire Switch era. And this would almost certainly not be a Xenoblade game, because the codenames for the Xenoblade games have to do with big folk, small folk, titans, things of that nature. Legacy is something else, which they are no longer hiring for. Seems like it might not be so far off either. And that's part of the interesting thing with these different codename leaks. These codename leaks, as I've been theorizing for last year, are actually all major internal Nintendo projects that are not that far off, that are fairly close. So given that Splatoon Raiders does not have a release window yet, I am going to assume it's not coming out in 2025, it's probably a 2026 title. And Nintendo announced it in the way they did because they do want to bring more relevance to the Nintendo Today app. They want to keep us paying attention to announcements there. But I also think this means Project SP Red, what I presume to be the next 3D Mario, and also Project Legacy, which I presume to be a new IP project from Monolith Soft, the makers of Xenoblade. These games probably are not so far off either. Most likely 2026 titles, although I do think there can be one more big Nintendo title that could be announced in a Nintendo Direct not so long from now, perhaps in the next couple weeks or so, and that may be the big holiday title, the November release. And I'll also point this out because I've seen some people are marking upon it already. I do not think this announcement of Splatoon Raiders really decreases the chances of a Nintendo Direct happening soon at all, because this is a game that does not seem like it's even coming out this year. The main reason why Nintendo would want to have a Nintendo Direct soon would be to give us clarity on what's to come out this year, give us the release dates for all the games we already know about, tell us more about these games, announce new things, and of course, a bevy of third-party offerings as well. Which brings me to another interesting little angle to this overall leak conversation. So, going back to Nash Weedle, and I've been talking about Nash Weedle a lot lately. Just yesterday we were talking about how another leak of his was confirmed. He had talked about months in advance that No Man's Sky would be getting a Switch 2 update and it would be for free. And what was confirmed the day before the Switch 2 launch? No Man's Sky update for Switch 2 at launch for free. It's one of many different things that Nash Weedle has said about Switch 2 that have come to fruition. There are plenty others that we've talked about before. Nash Weedle on April had talked about how there would be a few different announcements coming through the Nintendo Today app. Two of which are going to be Switch 1 titles for 2025, which it does not look like we've seen announcements for those quite yet. One of them is supposed to be a big surprise title for this year for Switch 2, which also does not appear to have been announced yet. I think that relates to the big holiday title that I think Nintendo will announce fairly soon. And then another is a big title for 2026 coming to Switch 2, and we know that Splatoon Raiders is a big title coming to Switch 2 without a release window provided, so I think there's a pretty good chance it's not coming out this year of 2025, but more likely 2026. So it looks like we have another leak that has been somewhat confirmed from Nash Weedle here. So this means that perhaps there are two more titles for Switch 1 that will be announced fairly soon, and there's also going to be a big title coming to Switch 2 for this year. Now, only some of these titles are going to be announced for the Today app, not all of them. And I also want to mention that in a podcast that we talked about before from friend of the channel, Attack the Backlog, he actually had a podcast with Nash Weedle, and in that podcast there were a variety of little interesting nuggets, but Nash Weedle seemed to have been hinting at that Metroid Prime 2 and 3 could be announced on the Today app, and now that I think about it, Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are technically two different titles, and we would assume they would also come to Switch 1 because the idea would be to provide these games for people so they can play them right before they get into Prime 4. Somewhat similar to how Nintendo provided Pikmin 1 and 2 right before Pikmin 4 came out. And Prime 4 is coming to Switch 1 and there's a Switch 2 edition, so I assume these games will be available on Switch 1, but of course thanks to Switch 2's backwards compatibility, they would also be available, and that does not mean they can't have some sort of minor enhancement on Switch 2 as well, like a resolution upgrade. And by the way, I think it also makes sense that they would announce Prime Remastered would have a resolution upgrade as well. Of course, maybe Nash Weedle means something bigger when it comes to these Switch 1 titles, and it's not just remasters of Prime 2 and 3. But something else that's very interesting about all of this is that something else that was talked about in Nash Weedle during this podcast is that apparently about a year and a half or so ago, the Zelda team, or internal Nintendo, wasn't actually specified that it was a Zelda team, but we assume, changed directions a little bit with the Ocarina of Time remake, and they're going through some sort of art style change. Now, given that Nash Weedle keeps getting things right, I am even more inclined to believe this rumor about Ocarina of Time remake. Now, for those who have been following me for a while, we've been theorizing, and I want to make that important distinction here, theorizing, as opposed to just a rumor, about an Ocarina of Time remake. I think there's a lot of reasons to think that Nintendo is going to be remaking Ocarina of Time, including statements from Eiji Aonuma, the producer of the overall Zelda series. But now we have this rumor that is further supporting the theory. And Nashville did just post something on Twitter. They're not even calling this a leak. They just said remasters-remakes. I'm not sure what you make of that. Are they suggesting that remasters and remakes are basically the same thing? Or are they suggesting that remasters then move on to remakes? We're not entirely sure, but given that we just got some substantial Zelda news yesterday of the Zelda movie delay, perhaps Zelda is on the mind of Nashweedle, and perhaps they want to talk about how we got the remasters of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D on 3DS, but now they're actually going to be doing remakes of them for Switch 2. And I know someone in the comments is going to say, oh, don't do Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask 3D like that. Those were ambitious remakes. I would say they were ambitious remasters. Literally, the box art of Ocarina of Time 3D refers to it as a remaster. If you read through the Ask Developer series, they talk about how they built upon the code of Ocarina of Time from the N64, meaning it is a remaster. A remake is building from the ground up totally new. And while there's certainly a blurred line situation there, because there are some pretty ambitious remasters we've seen before, like Prime 1 Remastered, for example, like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, for example, that has new content and vastly improved visuals to the point where it basically looks like a modern Xenoblade game. But in the case of this theorized and now also rumored Ocarina of Time remake, this would be something more ambitious than a remaster. We're not just talking about a new coat of paint here. There likely would be some changes to the overall game structure. Do I think they would be dramatic? I do not think they would be dramatic. I don't know if we're going to be calling this a reimagining, but over the last few decades, our idea of what a remaster is and what a remake is have been becoming more ambitious. But anyways, that's just some speculation based off this thing that Nashville is saying that really it could mean anything. I could be totally way off here, and I'm just talking about it because Nashville is getting even more things right here, and one thing they talked about was the Ocarina of Time remake very recently. But what do you make of Splatoon Raiders? What do you make of the Splatoon 3 updates? Myself, I actually think this might be quite nice for Splatoon 3. In just 2 days, we're going to be able to enjoy an enhanced version of Splatoon 3 on Switch 2. This gives me one more thing to play and enjoy. I didn't really fully enjoy everything on Splatoon 3 because I had a lot of disconnections while I was playing through the game, so maybe this time it'll be working a little bit better on Switch 2. Fingers crossed, we shall see. But I'm excited for these games, and I'm also excited on how these games seem to be further supporting these leaks about other exciting games coming in the not-so-distant future as well. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.